I'm Anna Fisher, and welcome to the Blue Curtain series. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Miss Shirley Simpson here with us today. Miss Shirley, as we affectionately call her at Emerald Coast Theater Company, is a great friend of the theater company. She's a great friend of ours. She is a writer, director, performer, producer, you name it, in the entertainment world, radio, stage, television, anything you could think of, Miss Shirley has done. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Now, I do have to correct, there are some things that people might think of that I have not done.
Well,
but as far as theater is concerned, you're right. I've been in it, well, for my whole life. You've heard this story before, Anna, but I'm going to tell you again that at one point when I was having to move a lot as a young child, I was in an auditorium. So it's such a crowded school. It was in a place called Owasso, Oklahoma. And it was a huge, what do they call those schools where all the grades are together, you know, where the high school kids come in, the junior highs. And the bus arrived, I never saw so many people in my life. So when we went into the auditorium, I was in, I believe, the second grade. And those of us who were that young, we were seated on the floor in front of the stage. The auditorium was jammed with people. So we're sitting there on the floor, and the principal comes in and welcomes everyone and says they have a guest artist to entertain for them. So a woman comes out on the stage, and I'm sitting on the floor with all these little kids looking straight up, and she says she's going to sing, but she has to have some help. So I raised my hand, and she said, there's somebody right there who will help me. So I went up on stage, and she sang, it was never on the hit parade, something called Ma, He's Making Eyes at Me. You never heard of it?
No.
Ma, He's awful nice to me. Ma, He's almost breaking my heart. I'm beside him, mercy, let his conscience guide him. Ma, he wants to marry me, be my honey bee. Every moment he gets closer, now he's leaning on my shoulder. Ma, he's kissing me.
Oh.
Well, she sang the song and told it to everybody, and so she asked me to sing it with her. I did. And evidently it was pretty funny because hundreds and hundreds of kids that were gathered in that huge auditorium were laughing and applauding. Oh, they just thought it was great. So that afternoon at lunchtime, first time I'd ever been to any school, I had been given a sack lunch and a nickel. But the place you bought your milk was across this huge play area. So I took my nickel and my package lunch, and I started across, and a ball, a hard ball, like boys play baseball with, came rolling down the field where I was walking. So I picked it up, and boy, this big boy, you know, had to be in 4th grade, he came running saying, "Get your hands off that ball," and it scared me. And one of the other boys said, "Don't bother her. She's the one that was so funny on that stage today." And I remembered that story for a long time. And at one point I told it, and someone said to me, "And that was your beginning of knowing the arts could really save you."
Yes.
And I think maybe it was. That was a long story for such a little bit of a point.
Well, no, I was actually going to ask you, when was really the first time that you felt that feeling that every performer knows can go back to that
That's right.
moment in time where they really felt, I mean, that's your origin story. That's where your superhero capabilities came into play. So yeah, that's a wonderful story. And I think maybe from then on, that was
Absolutely.
That was it for you.
I found out that when they said, "Do we have anyone?" if you raise your hand, it made you a part of something that you would not have been part of otherwise. And since I lived in 27 states before I was in junior high school.
Wow.
I did a lot of traveling. Oh gosh, did it come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just in 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. By then we were living in Tulsa, and my teachers, everyone, but the magic moment was when I auditioned for the 9th grade class play. I mean, that was the thing. And I walked to school early the next morning, so no one would be around when I went up to the English room. That's where you auditioned. There was no such thing as speech. It was English. And read the sign. And there it was. And I had been cast in that role. And it just, for someone who was always the new kid, because we moved so much, it was just an identifier. And then by the time we settled in Tulsa, it was wonderful. It was a marvelous thing to have. Terrific teachers, guidance, and that's where I first began working in radio at KVOO. The television, at that time, there was a man with a camera who would sit on the corner of the main street and film the cars going by, and they would show that we were getting ready for TV to come in.
Oh, wow.
And a long time ago.
Yes, but what a wonderful memory. And it sounds like theater was a real lifeboat for you after all of the having to be the new person everywhere.
That's exactly right.
You clung to that.
Yes, it was. And some of the finest people I've ever known were still, I remember one of them when I went to the University of Tulsa, and I was in a sorority, and they have a ceremony where you're signed in. And when I had the opportunity to see who had come to it, there was my English teacher, Edith Hill, from 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Yes, the people in theater, the theater itself it's just a godsend to somebody who moves around. It's your entree, it's your ticket.
Yes.
Your ticket in.
Absolutely. And Miss Shirley, you have over 70 years in this world, in this business, and what a wonderful body of work you have. Writing, directing, producing, performing, and such a captivating storyteller. And I want you to tell me some of your favorite projects that you've done. If you can choose one or two.
It's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, it truly is, because I don't think once I commit to a project, it's always the most important one that I've ever done. It was wonderful. I love my family. I'm the mother of 4 daughters, marvelous husband, great marriage, traveled the world with him.
Wow.
And he was quite a supporter of mine as far as wanting me to have the opportunity. He liked me doing television because the checks are slightly better when you're working in television than when you're doing theater.
Yes.
But he was wonderful. Saw everything that I ever did more than one time. I'm trying to think if I loved doing Driving Miss Daisy. That was a wonderful show. And every time I think of them, I think of the stories that go with them rather than the show itself. I would do a scene, and one of my friends who is here right now has heard this story many times, but I would do a scene from Driving Miss Daisy. I'd think, oh, that went well. And the director, wonderful man, he was out of Houston, the theater there, and he would call me down. Don't explain her, just be her, because the character in Driving Miss Daisy is not a very nice person. She's very opinionated. She's absolutely certain she knows everything. That's the way she conducts herself. Well, that didn't seem right to me, so I guess my subtext, what was under everything I said, was I'm really a very nice person, even though I'm so, every time I get the same doggone message from the director. So finally, I went into a rehearsal and he called me. I came off and he said, "Oh, you were so obnoxious, you were just wonderful."
That's great.
So Driving Miss Daisy was one. But years ago, oh my goodness, I got to play young, beautiful women. I got to play older, obnoxious women. You just get the chance to be so many things. And it was never a problem for me to figure out who I was. Sometimes it took me a little time. I've had Chuck, my guy, say to me on occasion, "You're not on stage right now." And I would catch myself and come back home. But I'm the mother of 4 daughters, and so taking care of them, and theater is very time consuming.
Yes.
So that's how I got into television. And I'm very, very pleased that one of the shows that I got to write and narrate won the ACE Award in New York City. And that is a much sought after award to this day. In fact, today, this morning, I had an email from the woman who was the director and producer of that show. We still, oh yes, when I used to make trips to New York with Chuck, she still lived over across the river where I had been when I worked in New York. And she would take the train in, I would get a cab to Grand Central, and we would meet and sit in one of the booths for 2 hours, just go at it and catch up on what we were doing. And so she's still a great friend. And some of my very best friends to this day are people that I was on stage with. And I did some directing. That was very satisfying, very. Especially if you were lucky enough to get someone who was good enough that you cast them, but once they were on stage, they needed some help, and you were able to lead them so that when they finished, I've had notes from people who've gone on after those shows and have said how much they got from working with me and for me, and what a great time they're having with their career. It's a marvelous, I don't have to tell you, it's a wonderful venture. It's a tricky line to raise a family.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
I'm sure you're nodding very, it is, but when you're able to do it, it's like I have a granddaughter right now, and I'm going to see if I can get her to come and stay with me while you have your children's theater this summer, because I think it would do her, whatever she's able to do with it, just a world of good to be part of it.
Yeah, it really can inform your life in so many ways.
Yes.
All the different areas of your life can be informed by anything creative, really, but even just by joining into anything in the performing arts specifically. I think it just gives you more empathy for other people. It gives you more perspective on the world around you. You know, I think it's always a good experience for anyone, whether you are going to pursue it or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you are fortunate enough that the material that you work with, it expands you so much. You are able to be in worlds, some worlds that you wouldn't want to be in.
Right.
But being in them helps you understand and relate to people who are living in those worlds in ways that you could never do otherwise.
Right.
It's the best.
It is. I agree, 100%. So, Miss Shirley, I always end my interviews with what I like to call a rapid 5. These are quick 5 questions, and just say the first thing that comes to your mind. And here we go.
All right.
What is a place that inspires you?
The audition.
Audition, being in the audition, any audition.
That's right.
I love it. That's great. Most people are afraid of auditions, but I like that it's inspiring for you. What is your favorite word? That's a hard one.
It is. It's generally, it's 2, or maybe even 3. Oh, that was fine.
So speaking of that, if you were to pursue a different profession in your life, what do you think you would have been interested in?
It still would revolve around what I love. I loved it, directing, and I'm not, but I loved the experiences that I did have directing. One night I was directing someone after a long weekend, a vacation weekend, and they were to be off book, know all their lines. And she obviously didn't. And I had someone who was in training to be a director sitting with me during this show. And so I stopped her and I said, you know, I think we could spend this evening a lot more profitable, in a more profitable way if you pick up your book and go home. And I'll see you at rehearsal tomorrow. Oh, but I know that's what we're doing. She left the stage with her book, and Johnny turned to me and said, I think that was rather harsh. I said, well, we'll know tomorrow night at rehearsal, won't we? She was off book. So, off book. I hadn't thought, till you asked me the question. That's a lovely phrase. It means you've reached the point in either a venture or a relationship or where you no longer have to reach for anything. You're off book. You can just be who you are.
Right.
And that's a wonderful feeling in theater when you become the person that you are supposed to be on stage.
Yeah, it's all there already, ready to go.
It's in there.
Yeah, that's cool. So, my last question.
Yes.
When you get to heaven,
Yes.
what would you like to hear God say to you when you reach the pearly gates?
Well, you know, off book isn't bad. But since I've used that, and one thing that you know about as a performer and a director is when you have an opportunity to add, you aren't going to pass it up. So let's see, what else would I love to hear him say? Oh, I'd love to hear him say, well chosen, which means that because we all have these choices that we make in what we do. I'd like him to approve the choices that I've made. Well done, though, is a pretty good one. I'm delighted to tell you, I know I will not hear him say, let's do that one more time. I'm sure that whatever I've managed to do, that's what we'll settle for. I
am absolutely sure of that. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today, Ms. Shirley.
You.
It was a pleasure. And I would also like to remind our viewers that coming up on October 5th, which is a week from next Tuesday, we will have our very own Shirley Valentine on the stage, portrayed by Ms. Shirley. This is a performance you don't want to miss. So please join us on October 5th to see Ms. Shirley as Shirley Valentine. And thank you so much for joining us today on The Blue Curtain.